Welcome to the Luke Macias Show. This week, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick set the tone for just how this session is going to go, and it should encourage conservative Republicans. We also have even more traditionally moderate establishment U.S. senators who are starting to wake up to the obstructionist behavior of the Democrat Party and are pushing back. And this is the same thing that we're seeing as more and more Republicans wake up at a state level as well. There's several other things we got to cover this week. Let's get to the show. I am recording this on my birthday. I'm turning 35 years old. I'm not a big birthday guy, but one of the coolest things that I get to do is share a birthday with my dad, who I was born on his 30th birthday. So my 35th is his 65th. It's also the anniversary of when Roe v. Wade was ruled on by the Supreme Court, which for the longest time growing up was a very sad reality. And now on this side of a very appropriate Supreme Court ruling gets to be a day that I remember a previous former overturned Supreme Court case that led to the slaughter and destruction of so many innocent lives. We still do have innocent lives that are being ended outside of their will, forcibly and violently murdered. And that is something that we will always stand up for, and we must always stand up to protect. I'm drinking this morning, because I sometimes tell you all about the different stuff I'm drinking, is a cappuccino. And this cappuccino is made, since I didn't make my own coffee this morning, I didn't have time. And then I was like, it's my birthday, I can go buy a cappuccino. And the thing is, we have an espresso machine because I want to save all the money on buying cappuccinos. It's like, it pays for itself in 2.5 months. But I went to Theory Coffee in San Antonio. And here's the thing you have to know, especially for all of you Austin insiders. The cappuccino that I'm drinking can be found at another coffee shop in Austin. The same cappuccino is at Once Over Coffee, which is right at First and Old Torf. Once Over Coffee. And I figured this out because I loved Theory's cappuccino in San Antonio. I think it's the best cappuccino in San Antonio. And then I like Once Over. And then I realized that Wild Gift Coffee is actually the previous owner of Once Over, who also has a roaster. He provides all the beans, and that's also where Theory gets their beans, from Austin, and they ship them in. So this is, I like the cappuccino, but it's the same thing. And this is the one that we make at home now. So we buy our beans there and we make them at home and all that stuff. Okay, so this week, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick set the tone, and I'm going to read a little more lengthy post that he made. I think this helps contextualize how we're going to get started for the session. So here's what it says. Recently, and this is the words of our Lieutenant Governor, recently a story was written about the winners and losers in the election of Speaker Burrows. The story underscores the total lack of understanding by the media of politics, principles, and courage. The article said that the 52, meaning the 52 Republicans that voted for the Republican nominee David Cook, were losers when, in fact, they were reformers and the true long-term winners. For the first time ever, 52 of the 88 Republicans openly voted against the eventually elected Republican speaker because they believed the party in power should elect their speaker, not the minority party. 88 Democrats would never let all Republicans and a few Democrats pick their speaker, which is true. This is also going to get into the comments made by Senator John Thune on the floor. For those that don't know, Republican House caucus rules say the speaker is to be elected in caucus. And the first day of session, all Republicans are to follow their commitment to vote for the Republican caucus nominee, with 88 Republicans out of the 150 House members. This ensures the majority party elects the speaker. That caucus nominee was not Dustin Burrows. These 52 Republican House members were willing to stand up for what they believed was right and for what their voters asked them to do. Dustin Burrows, who once strongly agreed with those rules and who famously said Democrats should never pick the Republican speaker, won with a majority of Democrats. But make no mistake, Burrows was not the big winner on Tuesday. He took the shortcut to victory when he couldn't get his own party to elect him speaker. The big winners were the 52 courageous, principled Republicans who stood tall and voted for what they believed was right, despite the potential political repercussions. To these 52 Republicans, ignore the media criticisms and the small-minded critics. Hold your heads up high. You have started a movement that others will follow. That's what leaders do. Your voters are proud of you. And as a conservative Republican, I'm proud of you. You will never, ever regret that vote. You have taken the high road. The public expects us to work for them. The speaker will have every opportunity to fulfill his promise of being the most conservative speaker in Texas history. I am committed to holding the line on the conservative policies that have made Texas great. It's important for Burrows to be successful as the most conservative speaker ever, as he promised to be. That's good for Texas. His record will tell the story. What Dan Patrick is laying out here is well framed when it comes to the stand that was taken last week. I, of course, talked about this. If you have not listened or watched the show from last week, it is 5 ways conservatives won, even with the Democrats electing Dustin Burrows as the Speaker of the Texas House, and gotten great feedback. That show got shared quite a bit, a little bit more than average. And so just a sign that I think a lot of Texans are waking up and tuning into what is happening. One of the things I said there, which I will reiterate, is that it has taken a ton of work to get a majority of the majority party to say something needs to change and be more in line with the Republican Party of Texas, our lieutenant governor, our many other statewide, Attorney General Ken Paxton. And the fact that we've gotten here sets us up to have a tremendously successful conservative session. Now, you might say, how? Because the assumption is that the same deal that got cut on the first day is just going to get cut every single week. And I'm actually going to break down for you today where I think some of the deals will get cut. And I think this is important to set the table for. People will sometimes ask, well, what deal was cut? What policy was promised to get these 70% Democrats? And that is not how this works. And here's what I mean by that. Last session, when Dade Phelan got the Democrats to support him, he did not say, if you elect me speaker, I will have John Kemple kill the critical race theory ban on universities in his committee. I will have Dustin Burrows kill dozens of policies. We're going to pass a ban on sex change surgeries, but we're going to kill the protection of the detransitioners. We're going to kill ESG legislation. We're going to kill the bill that would put the 10 Commandments back in the classrooms. That deal is not cut before the session starts. What happens is that the general agreement is that we, the Democrats and Republicans that are sitting down to elect the speaker, are going to decide how to govern. And y'all are going to get to decide. Y'all, the Democrats, will help us decide. And the way we will ensure that is putting Dustin Burrows as the Speaker of Calendars, who, you know, Joe Moody, will work with you to kill these bills when the time comes. That is how a deal is cut and made, right? And that is how it has been done with Strauss, with Dennis, and with Dade. So then the question is, what is the deal? How is the deal going to be cut? What then happens is that things that were very politically painful for Republicans in the previous election cycle are then kind of prioritized to pass to take that pain away. And the next thing in line becomes the negotiation tool for the Democrats and Republicans. And what do I mean by that? In Dade's very first session as speaker, he and Dustin and all of the Republicans killed the ban on sex change surgeries for children, right? They did. Matt Krause had the bill. The Senate passed a bill that dealt with this. The House killed it. Okay. So for the 2 years between Dade's first and second term, children were abused with transgender ideology, surgical procedures, puberty blockers that could permanently destroy their body. That happened for 2 years. Now, when that happened, The Republican Party of Texas and conservatives and all these people talked all across the state about all of the bills that were killed. And of course, that was the number one thing talked about. The Texas House killed this ban on sex change surgeries for children. And so by the time the next session rolls around, Dade Phelan is not going to kill the ban on sex change surgeries again. He was hit for doing it. His colleagues were hit for doing it. Some of his colleagues who are returning are saying, hey, that was miserable. I had to explain it. Everyone asked me at every single town hall, why'd you kill the ban on sex change surgeries? Like, I don't know what to tell them. And what they basically get told is, don't worry, we're going to pass it this time. Now, what was the bill in his second term that was not that? Well, one was Democrat chairs, right? That was continuing to gain momentum. Dade knew a lot of Republicans were going to vote to ban it. And so he just ruled that you couldn't vote on it. He didn't even want to know how many Republicans. Dustin had to make a commitment in his campaign that people would vote on this. And so that will happen on Thursday. And we'll, of course, next week talk about the results of that. My prediction is that the ban passes. I think the Republicans that voted to elect Dustin Burrows and broke their promise to Republicans to govern in a Republican way. When I say broke their promise, I don't mean, for some of them, they might have taken a public position that says, this is what I'm going to do. And then they did the opposite. But for most of them, these are people that would have told you before, I'm going to vote for the more moderate choice for speaker. But I would believe that even for those individuals, they campaigned in their districts to say, I am a strong Republican and I'm going to go govern like a strong Republican. And I bet you, if you asked all the people that were getting all their TV ads and mailers and all this stuff, nowhere on those mailers were, I'm going to be voting with 70% of the Democrat caucus for the next speaker against the Republican nominee. Nowhere on it. Anyways, a lot of those Republicans know we at least need to ban Democrat chairs to kind of clean up and give ourselves another notch to take back to the district and say, hey, I did this thing that we have not been able to do in the past. So I do actually believe that the Democrat chair ban will pass. School choice was killed last session. I believe school choice will pass this session in some form or fashion. I hope that it is as good a bill as possible. And I actually have high hopes and expectations that it will be a very strong school choice bill. And then the other one that I would point to that's more or less guaranteed to pass this session is a China land ban. The Texas Senate passed a ban on some land and minerals and water and other things being able to be sold to China and Chinese citizens, Chinese nationalists. The Texas House killed that bill. That was a very painful bill to kill for the Texas House. They did do it. When they did it, it became a big campaign issue. Dade Phelan ended up having to appoint an interim committee interim. So the speaker can appoint these committees in between sessions at any time. And they do it. They do it sometimes to give different allies a chairmanship and prestige. They also do it as a campaign talking point. So as Dade is getting hammered for killing the China land ban that all these other states are passing, he says, I've created a committee that's going to look at addressing this issue. And then Cole Hefner is the chair. He has a bill. He's going to likely be the one that Burrows designates to carry this bill. So a ban on China land in some form or fashion, and that'll be another one that conservatives work to make sure it is as strong as possible, will pass this session. So the same way that the ban on sex change surgeries last session was going to pass, it was just a matter of what it looked like, how it was implemented, whether it was weak or strong. There are certain policies that will happen this session like that. The Democrats already know it. Republicans across the board know it. If you want to know what some of those are, the best thing to look at is the Texas conservative commitment. Dustin Burrows put this out on June 14th. He was what some of his colleagues who teamed up with him and the Democrats said was the architect of this. This was being done when the Republican Party was releasing its priorities. So, and I'll just read what Dustin Burrows said when he released it, because this was a competing document with the Texas GOP priorities, right? It's not to say that some of the things on this list aren't good, but actually what we'll do is we'll kind of compare this list to the GOP priorities. What is on both of them and what is missing? And this will tell you the type of policies that will be up for negotiation with the Democrat coalition that elected Dustin Burrows Speaker. Before we get there, though, let's take a quick break.
America is at a crossroads. Now, more than ever, Texas must step up and lead the country. We don't have time to mess around. The only way to save America is with a strong Texas. You and I know this, but so do the enemies of life and liberty. Therefore, you and I have no choice but to stand up and fight. I'm Sarah Gonzalez, and to the enemies of liberty, I say, come and take it.
I am going to talk about the difference between the Texas conservative commitment and the Texas GOP priorities. But before I do, I want to go to a quick clip of Senator John Thune on the floor of the United States Senate. Now, Senator John Thune would have been seen of those running for majority leader, John Cornyn, John Thune, and Rick Scott, as the most moderate choice. And he did end up winning that election. But he was the most moderate choice. He is the understudy to Mitch McConnell. I mean, literally the guy right underneath Mitch who's been running the Senate when Mitch doesn't know what day of the week it is. And so people would have assumed that John naturally would have just been 100% a carbon copy clone of Mitch McConnell. But his tone against his Democrat colleagues when it comes to moving forward with Donald Trump's agenda, specifically a lot of his nominees, is actually very encouraging. Let's go to this clip.
I was listening to the chair of the Intelligence Committee just a moment ago talking about this nominee, and I was curious. I asked the Senator from Arkansas, chairman of the Intelligence Committee, what was the vote coming out of committee for Mr. Radcliffe?
The vote was 14-3.
Okay, so 14-3 coming out of the committee. And we've now wasted a whole day where we could have been acting on that nomination. And so really, I think the question before the House is, do we want to vote on these folks on Tuesday or vote on them on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday? Because that's what we're going to do. This can be easy or this can be hard. This is a nominee that came out of the Intelligence Committee 14-3. It is a bipartisan nomination to the Central Intelligence Agency. This is about America's national security interests. And we're stalling. So that's not going to happen. We're going to file cloture on them. You can force us to staying around here, and we can vote on these things Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. But we're going to vote on them. And this one shouldn't be hard, folks. I understand there are some that are going to draw some opposition from the other side of the aisle. But Democrats and Republicans, in a very big bipartisan fashion, agree that he is very qualified for this job, that is an important job to America's national security interests, and frankly, I believe we ought to fill it as soon as we possibly can. So it's going to be a big vote here on the floor. Everything we're doing right now is just stalling. And I don't know what that accomplishes for you, but we're going to be here voting on him.
When I tell you I'm encouraged by the changing tone and tenor of many Republicans, it's not only happening in Texas, it's even happening on a national level. And this is not an endorsement of everything that John Thune is going to do as majority leader. It is recognition, though, that this type of tone and approach to the minority party, the Democrats, did not happen under Mitch McConnell. And even the majority leaders there are saying, hey, something's got to change. And if y'all want to hold this up for a couple days, guess what? We're voting on this guy. He's going to get a bunch of Democrat votes. It's not even close. And this is going to happen over the weekend. Don't make dinner plans, is what Senator Tom Cotton said to the Democrats. Don't make dinner plans on Thursday or Friday. We're going to be here. And the second we can vote, we're voting because we've got work to do. The Democrats are going to try to stall and stand in the way, and they will do so on a national level and a state level. But it is really worth understanding and recognizing the fact that many Republicans are realizing that their voters expect them to push back, and that's exactly what they're doing. So Dustin Burrows rolls out the Texas conservative commitment back in June, and he does this to compete with the Texas GOP priorities. because Texas GOP says, here are priorities we want to push. And then, of course, this group of House Republicans are like, these are our priorities. And this is what he actually said when he rolled it out. Today, the Texas conservative commitment was unveiled, and I am deeply proud to have my name on the list of signatures as we declare to all Texans our priorities for the upcoming session in 2025. Okay, so that's what Dustin has said. Now, it would be odd if things that Dustin says are priorities, and these are our priorities, aren't able to get done, because every one of the things on that commitment would pass if it was on the floor. So literally a deal would have to get cut for any of those things not to pass. This is why I think many of them are going to pass, pure and simple. And so let's see, what are those things? Well, under border security, it says that the Texas conservative commitment should enact the strongest laws possible to defend our southern border, ensure illegals are denied entry and not incentivized to be in our state, protect Texas sovereignty, and stop the flow of fentanyl into our communities. Now, that's a pretty broad statement, okay? I'm going to read to you the Texas GOP priorities on border enforcement. Now, when I read that, none of you would disagree that we should enact the strongest laws possible. The problem is, when the Texas House sets its own goal, it's going to say we enacted the strongest laws possible. You will never, ever, ever hear House leadership end a session and go, we did not enact the strongest border security laws possible, but we did enact some strong border security policies, right? Whatever they do is going to be the strongest possible. So the word thing's really broad to go, we can definitely do that because we're going to say we did it. What the Texas GOP said under their priorities, and this does not even cover all of the different immigration policy that could pass. These are just the priorities. Creating a Texas Department of Homeland Security that can prevent illegal entry and trafficking and deport illegals to Mexico or to their nations of origin. Now, some people will think that this is less important now because Donald Trump is president. But the truth is, Donald Trump is not going to be president for the next 50 years. And so it is actually important that Texas today, while it has the votes, pass a border enforcement agency that is prepared if the Democrats ever get a hold of the White House again and ever try to open our border again to deny illegal entry. The other one is prohibiting, with mandatory fines and jail time, individuals, corporations, nonprofits, governments, and social media entities from assisting or inciting illegal entry. That makes sense. Requiring the use of E-Verify by all employers in Texas, with significant penalties for business owners who violate this requirement. This is going to be part of what the Trump administration has deemed the largest mass deportation program in American history. If Texas is going to let every Texas business employ as many illegals as they want to employ, they are not going to be helping. They're going to be working against the Trump administration's efforts to have these people return to their countries of origin. And you're already seeing the slide away from this. Not only was this not mentioned in the Texas conservative commitment, but Carl Tepper, who is one of Dustin Burrows' sidekicks there in Lubbock, already filed a bill, but it only says that government contractors should use E-Verify, okay? So E-Verify for government contractors, not for all employers, but for the government contract that you're doing, there has to be only citizens. And then ending all subsidies in public services, including in-state college tuition and enrollment in public schools for illegal aliens, except for emergency medical care. That is a Texas GOP priority. That's not on the Texas conservative commitment. Now, it does say, quote unquote, it says ensure illegals are not incentivized to be in our state. Well, that doesn't tell me anything, right? So the point is, if they kill in-state tuition this session, and you asked Dustin Burrows in an interview, hey, did you ensure that illegals are not incentivized to stay in our state? He's going to go, yeah, we ensured that. We said it and we did it. But there could still be in-state tuition because it's just not clear. So you can see here where there's a couple policies already, before we've even gotten to the other stuff, that are up for negotiation with Democrats. The other issue, a big issue, is going to be on the issue of election integrity. In the Texas conservative commitment, it says enact the strongest election integrity laws in the country and ensure only U.S. citizens can vote and make sure those who commit election fraud are fully prosecuted. Now, this is interesting. Again, pretty vague. So this is the Burrows conservative commitment to you, which means that at the end of this session, I promise you, House leadership is going to say we have the strongest election integrity laws in the country. I don't know what those laws are going to be, but I'll tell you this, they're going to be the strongest. It's like having the most conservative session ever. I don't know how conservative it's going to be, but I can tell you they're going to say it's the most conservative session ever. It doesn't really matter. They set their own goalposts and then they declare it to be so. You got dozens of them that didn't return, many of whom were defeated in their primary, and the whole way they were screaming, most conservative session in Texas history. We just had the most conservative session in Texas history. So there is that separation from reality. But when I read this, very, very broad, right? Okay, ensure only U.S. citizens can vote. Duh. We all agree with that. And then make sure those who commit election fraud are fully prosecuted. The interesting thing is it's actually House leadership, Cole Hefner, Dustin Burrows, Dade Phelan, that gutted the bill because the Senate passed. First, they said it wasn't a felony to illegally vote. Then when the Senate returned it to a felony through a bill, the House changed it. And this is the little thing they changed. They said it is a felony if you knowingly illegally vote. So the Senate said it's a felony if you cast a vote illegally. And the House said it's a felony if you knowingly cast a vote illegally. And you would go, well, what's the difference? Well, the difference is that I could pull the voter rolls and tell you there are 100 illegal immigrants that cast a vote in this election. And unless any of those illegal immigrants are individuals that you have proof that they knew before they cast that vote that it was a felony to vote, they did not commit a felony, right? Because it's not a felony to cast the vote. It's a felony to vote when you know. You have to have like a text message from this person or like a diary entry that's like, I'm going to vote tomorrow illegally. And you go, aha, now I know you're a felon. But if you didn't, if you just went and voted, and then when law enforcement comes, you go, I'm not allowed to vote. I didn't know. And if you talk to your lawyer, they're just going to say, hey, I just need to make sure you didn't know. As long as you didn't know, well, you actually didn't commit a crime. So now they're saying we want to make sure that those who commit election fraud are fully prosecuted. But the definition of election fraud in the Texas House so far has been knowingly illegally voting, not illegally voting. Now, what does the Texas GOP prioritize when it comes to elections? They want to require a proof of citizen to register to vote. They want to require that counties and the Secretary of State to update their voter rolls at least quarterly. They want to restrict mail-in ballots to disabled, military, and eligible citizens who are out of the country for the entire voting period. Mail-in ballots is where the most fraud occurs. It's why Democrats tried to nationalize mail-in ballots, and they did nationalize mail-in ballots illegally during the 2020 election. I'm just reading a couple of these, by the way. Closing party primaries for only registered Republicans. 100% should do that. Removing existing Secretary of State waivers to comply with current election code. So what happens is a lot of these counties will say, hey, we're going to not follow the law in these areas, and they'll be granted a waiver from the Secretary of State. They're saying, hey, we should ban that. Explicitly, this is Texas GOP priorities now, explicitly codifying the ability of the Attorney General to prosecute violations of election code. Now, these are specifics that would make Texas's election laws the strongest in the nation. I do believe that one of the deals, I could be wrong, I hope to be proven wrong, but I believe that one of the deals that will 100% be cut between Burrows and the Democrats will be ensuring the Democrats can, with Texas law, continue to vote in the Republican primary. That will be then a fight that will be had with the Republican Party of Texas. But I do believe there will be a fight to prevent the closing of our primaries. And I do think the Texas House will work hard to make sure that Democrats can keep voting. You get down into some of this, protect children. Here's Dustin Burrows' Texas conservative commitment to you. Fully protect children from predatory threats online throughout our communities. That's it. That's the Texas conservative commitment. Now, I bet you they're not going to say we didn't fully protect children online through our communities. The Texas GOP priorities say they want to prohibit taxpayer funding to any entity that permits or promotes sexually inappropriate content to minors and legislatively ban instruction on sexual orientation and gender ideology in schools and libraries. The Texas House killed that bill last session. That needs to pass. Repealing affirmative defenses in the Texas Penal Code and redefining quote unquote harmful materials to remove loopholes provided by the modified Miller test. And if you don't understand that issue, that's just this affirmative defense is that certain people like teachers can introduce children to these problematic materials and inappropriate materials, and they have this affirmative defense in state code to do so. Establishing an independent inspector general for education to investigate fraud, waste, abuse, and criminal conduct within schools and refer findings to prosecutorial authorities, and then compel superintendents to report sex crimes within schools to outside law enforcement, and removing immunity from civil liability for schools and their employees. If you're going to hide the predators in the schools, you're going to be liable. Great policies, right? Now, can't you see how that Texas conservative commitment and the Texas GOP priorities are quite different? One's like, we're going to protect our kids fully. How? By protecting them fully. And then the Texas GOP priorities are like, these are 4 things. Now, if you go to the Republican platform, there are 30 different policies you could pass, and a lot of them should pass. But I will say, it's much easier to focus on just these priorities. And then the conservative commitment is just really broad. So I'm sure they will say they follow through with this commitment regardless. Both say we need to ban taxpayer funded lobbying. That is a very clear cut issue. How that bill is crafted will determine how easy it is for lobbyists to still get a bunch of taxpayer money for work that they will do. And so hopefully it is as strong a ban as possible. There are good policies with the Texas conservative commitment and the Texas GOP priorities. There are some overlap in that. And this is, in fact, right here, state security and sovereignty. This is what it says. And this goes back to what I told you was going to happen. Like, China land's going to pass. It says secure Texas from hostile foreign countries and organizations by prohibiting ownership of critical infrastructure, land, or other resources that could undermine sovereignty and security, and defy federal actions that violate Texas's constitutional rights. Now, that is the Texas conservative commitment. And then Texas is not for sale, which is the Texas GOP priority. It says banning the sale of real property in Texas and discontinuing taxpayer funding and incentives to governments, entities, and proxies of China, Iran, North Korea, and Russia, and to individuals from these nations who are not legal permanent residents or citizens of the United States. And so a little more specific, and that's where I think, the slight difference is, but I think we've already won on this, because when they did this in June, Cole Hefner then tried to kind of soften the language. There was a big battle of that throughout the summer and fall. And I think that House leadership currently has already kind of caved on this to a significant extent, because this one says secure them from owning critical infrastructure, land, and other resources. So just making sure it's very clear, they should not own Texas. They shouldn't own land in Texas, property. They shouldn't be able to purchase real property in Texas. I do think, though, that is one that Democrats know they can't kill. House leadership know they have to pass. And so it's going to be a policy that will get worked on this session. Now, there are other ones. We could go literally line by line through the entire thing. I don't think we need to. My broader point is this. You can already see some of those areas, though, that are going to be up for negotiation and deal cutting with the Democrats. And the Democrats know this, too. They know, well, he's agreed that they're going to do something to secure the elections, but he has not agreed to the Texas GOP priorities. He's agreed that they're going to do something on border, but he has not said that they're definitely going to get rid of all these taxpayer-funded incentives. So all of those bills are going to be bills that Republicans can work hard to advance and must work hard to advance, because those are going to be in the negotiation table. They're going to be on the negotiation table between Dustin Burrows and the 70% of the Democrat caucus that elected him as Speaker of the Texas House. You're not going away. I'm not going away. Texas conservative voices are not going to stop making it clear that these things need to happen. And what I believe we're going to see over the next several months is that Republicans will continue to wake up to the new reality that so many conservative Republicans were elected into positions by the grassroots that they have to deliver more wins than they ever have. And that's going to be the question Are they willing to run the legislature in such a way that means they cannot sit down at the end and cut a deal and kill 36 conservative policies? Because that's what they did last time. Dozens and dozens, almost over 50 conservative Republican policies. The article I have is 48, but there's many others that I didn't even list on that one. There are going to be tons of policies that can and should pass and would have the votes if they hit the floor. And will House leadership stand in the way? Or do they recognize, God, we're dug so deep in this deal, we got to climb out, and we're actually going to let a lot of this conservative policy through? And ultimately, the reason you spend any time doing this stuff, the reason you donate to things, the reason you block walk, the reason you show up, the reason you attend meetings, the reason you tell your friends to get engaged is because you want to see these policies enacted into law. And so don't make things personal. Don't take things personal. Focus on the policy that will make Texas a better place. That is what I want to spend time every single week talking to you about on the Luke Macias Show. It is why I'm so grateful that I get to come to you on a regular basis. May God bless you, and may God bless the great state of Texas.
Do you want to get your news from people who share your values? Texas Scorecard, real news for real Texans.